Have you ever stopped to think God can use even those who do not believe in him to fulfill his plans?
This is the story of Artaxerxes and Nehemiah, a story of faith, courage, and divine sovereignty.
Persia ruled a vast world of provinces and peoples, where one throne could bend history without ever lifting a sword.
In Susa, wealth and threat lived side by side, towering columns, gold-lined halls.
At the center sat Artaxerxes, ruler of a mighty empire. Powerful, fierce. He honored the gods of Persia, and to him the God of Israel was simply one name among the religions of conquered peoples.
Yet Scripture reveals a mystery. When God decides to act, even foreign kings can become instruments without realizing it. Inside that palace served Nehemiah, an exiled Jew, a quiet believer placed near the most dangerous power on earth.
The cupbearer tasted first. If poison waited inside, Nehemiah would die, so his position is. In his heart, Nehemiah carried Jerusalem, its burned gates, its fallen walls, its shame.
Then brothers arrived from Judah with words that cut deep. The walls were torn down, the gates burned, and the people lived in misery. He sat down and wept. Not because the past was painful, but because the promise still looked unfinished in the present. He fasted, mourned, and prayed, confessing sin, pleading for mercy, and asking God to move the heart of a pagan king.
Months passed. Nehemiah kept serving, kept waiting, and kept praying, because God often moves in silence.
Then the moment arrived. The month of Nisan, the 20th year of Artaxerxes, an exact date.
The throne room stirred with ritual and power. Courtiers bowed, soldiers watched, incense drifted. Nehemiah entered with the wine as he always did. But this time his grief broke through his discipline, and the sadness showed on his face.
In that court, sadness could be read as disloyalty. One wrong look could cost a life, yet the open...
Artaxerxes noticed immediately. The king who watched everything saw a crack in his servant's composure, and he did not ignore it. Nehemiah was afraid. He knew that a simple misunderstanding could end him, yet he also sensed that he answered with honor and truth. Not manipulation, not performance, just the weight of a ruined city resting on a faithful heart.
Jerusalem, the city of his fathers, lay in ruins. Walls torn down, gates burned, a people... Then the unthinkable happened. The king asked what he could do, power bending toward a servant, as if an unseen hand had turned the moment. Before he answered, Nehemiah prayed, silently, instantly, asking for wisdom and favor. He asked for permission to go to Jerusalem, to rebuild what was broken, because faith does not only mourn ruins. He asked for letters, official authority, so governors could not block him, and enemies could not halt the mission with politics. He asked for wood to rebuild gates and walls, resources from the empire itself, because God can fund restoration through unexpected hands. And he received an escort, protection on a dangerous rove, because the same king who could execute him now guarded his mission. Why would a pagan king do this? Because God's hand was at work, turning a decision into destiny without the king ever understanding the deeper story. The permission became an official decree. Not a whisper, not a favor. An empire-backed order.
When Nehemiah arrived, he surveyed the damage in the dark, because wise restoration begins with clear vision, not loud announcement.
The gates were burned, the walls were open wounds, and every gap invited threat.
The people lived under contempt, not because they lacked identity, but because they lacked protection. A city without walls becomes a city without dignity.
Nehemiah revealed the king's letters. Authority stood behind him, but something greater stood within him. He called the people to rise, not with empty optimism, but with a clear mission. Rebuild the wall.
But restoration always attracts resistance. Powerful neighbors saw rebuilt walls as a threat, and they began to move against the mission.
They mocked the work, hoping ridicule would do what armies could not, break the spirit before the stones could rise. Nehemiah answered pressure with prayer and action. Faith did not replace effort. Faith. Day by day, the wall rose. What had been open shame became a visible answer. Proof that God.
Mockery hardened into threat. When words failed to stop the work, enemies considered force, hoping fear would freeze the builders. Nehemiah set watchmen. The people built with one hand and guarded with the other, refusing to let fear steal the future. A signal was prepared so the people could unite instantly. Unity became their defense, and purpose became their courage. They worked into the night. Restoration demanded endurance, and endurance proved their faith was not a moment, it was a commitment. The opposition shifted tactics. When intimidation failed, deception and distraction moved in, because
Patience came to lure Nehemiah away. But he understood that leaving the wall would endanger the mission, so he stayed where God placed him.
Accusations spread like smoke, attempting to label restoration as rebellion. But lies lose power when
Nehemiah kept the people focused. He did not answer every attack. He answered with progress, and the work moved forward.
the gaps narrowed. What once looked impossible now looked inevitable, because obedience, repeated daily, new beams rose where ashes had been. Gates returned, and with them returned safe order.
The opposition saw the wall standing and their influence shrinking. When God's purpose advances,
But there was something even bigger than walls and gates. This decree to rebuild Jerusalem touched a prophetic timeline that
long before Nehemiah stood in Susa, Daniel's vision pointed to a starting moment. In order to restore,
the empire's paperwork became heaven's marker. A king thought he authorized a journey, but God used that signal. Scripture shows this again and again. God can use rulers who do not know him.
A king may believe his will is absolute, but God can redirect a heart like water, quietly.
Nehemiah's story proved that faith can thrive in exile and purpose can survive under pressure. When God
Here is the truth that changes how you see the world. God's sovereignty does not depend on human belief. It depends on his will.
God can open doors through systems that seem cold, through authorities that seem unmoved, and through situations.
Remember the months of waiting. The unseen work was real long before the visible answer arrived. God answered by moving a king, not with lightning, but with a question, a favor, and a decree. The wall stood, the gates returned, and the people regained safety, identity, and strength.
Now the question turns toward you. Where have you decided something is impossible?
If God could move a Persian king who did not know him, then no heart is beyond his reach, and no door is beyond his ability to open. God can use the unlikely. He can use a system, a decision, a supervisor, a ruler, without.
And when God finds someone who truly seeks him, someone who prays, waits, and obeys, the impossible starts to become inevitable.
This is not random. It is a pattern across biblical history. God remains above every kingdom.
Artaxerxes likely believed he simply rewarded a loyal servant. Yet his name remains in Scripture as proof.
If you feel surrounded by forces you cannot change, remember this story. Your circumstances have never been outside God's control. Pray with honesty, wait with faith, act with wisdom. Nehemiah's path shows that prayer.
What impossible situation do you need to place into God's hands today? The moment you surrender it, you stop carrying a weight you were never meant to hold alone.
The rebuilt wall became a witness, not just to human effort, but to the unseen hand of God.
Take a moment and reflect. Where have you limited God in your thinking? And what would change if you believed he can work even through unlikely people?
Share in the comments what area of your life needs God to move in an impossible way. Your testimony may strengthen someone else who is still waiting.
If this story touched your heart, support the channel, stay with us, and keep learning how God's hand works in places you least expect. God used a king who did not know him, and he honored a servant who sought him. Nothing